Babylon, baby. It's a city shrouded in mystery. You know the name. It rings a bell in the ears of 99 out of 100 folks. But dig deeper, and you'll find that only 1 in 100 can tell you anything beyond the fact that it's an ancient state with a towering reputation. Well, let me set the record straight, my friends. We're gonna unravel the enigma that is Babylon, and we'll do it with style. The biggest mistake folks make when talking about Babylon is drowning themselves in a sea of complex terms, biblical references, and a whole bunch of forgotten tribes. They just complicate the whole damn story. But fear not, my darlings, because for the next 10 minutes, we're gonna keep it simple. Make it easy to understand. We'll take a glimpse at the lives of Alexander the Great, Hammurabi, Nebuchadnezzar, and a bunch of other famous cats you've probably heard of but barely know. First things first, let's get it straight. Babylon ain't no state, it's a damn city. Although it's worth mentioning that Babylon often found itself as the capital of some mighty states. It conquered, it was conquered, it went back and forth. There ain't no reliable date for its foundation, but them historians reckon it happened somewhere around the 25th century BC. Now just think about that for a minute. Around the same time, them Egyptians were busy erecting the Great Pyramid of Cheops. So should we consider the Babylonians less ancient than them Egyptians? Hell no. Digging up the remains of Babylon ain't an easy task, thanks to some pesky groundwater issues. But even them ancient texts talk about them so-called first generations, people who walked this earth over 4.5 millennia ago. Now that's ancient, my friends. It ain't far-fetched to believe that them Babylonians lived right on the same spot where Babylon stands today. After all, there's clear evidence of the Sumerian civilization, and them ancient Romans considered that Sumerian gig to be as ancient as the Romans themselves are to us. It's a hell of a riddle, ain't it? Babylon, she was sitting pretty 80 kilometers south of present-day Baghdad, right there in Iraq. And let me tell you, that location was prime real estate back in the day. The Persian Gulf was nearby, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers were flowing through, offering plenty of water for irrigation and farming. Now that's some similarities to them Egyptians across the way. If you know your history, you'd know them ancient folks saw them rivers as the source of life itself. Anyhow, for the first few centuries of its existence, Babylon was just a backwater city, part of the Sumero-Akkadian kingdom that stretched across what we now call Syria, Iraq, Iran, and a couple more lands. It didn't hold much significance, except for its royal viceroy collecting tribute. But as the second millennium BC was nearing its end, that kingdom crumbled, giving birth to a bunch of mini-states. And of course, the first thing them mini-states did was start fighting each other. In the midst of all that bloodshed, around the 19th century BC, Babylon stepped into the spotlight. The Amorites took control, led by a chief named Samsu-iluna, and boom, we got ourselves the old Babylonian kingdom. It lasted a couple hundred years or so, and let me tell you, Babylon had its greedy hands on most of Mesopotamia, stretching from the Persian Gulf in the south all the way up to Nineveh in the north. Now, let's talk about a guy named Hammurabi. You've heard the name, I'm sure, but you don't really know the extent of his power. Hammurabi, my friends, was the 6th ruler of that dynasty. He was the one who brought most of the land under one roof, unifying the fractured pieces. And you know what else he did? He laid down a bunch of laws. Yeah, we're talking about the 18th century BC, and Babylon already had laws way back then. But let me warn you, them laws weren't for the faint-hearted. If a builder messed up and built a faulty house, well, they'd be kissing the hangman's noose. And doctors, oh boy, if they botched an operation, their hands would be saying their final goodbyes. And if you were caught harboring slaves, well, you were straight up marching to the gallows. Those laws were plastered on poles all over the land, letting folks know what was what. It says something about the literacy of the people, don't it? That's backed up by their astronomical prowess. Or maybe it's better to say astrological. Them Babylonians tried to predict the future by studying Venus, and only them priests dabbled in space exploration. But hey, we gotta give them props, 'cause studying them stars and planets some 4,000 years ago ain't no joke. And let's not forget their architectural marvels. Them temples, monuments, and palaces that would leave you breathless.
This video is brought to you by Thorum. Take a look at this rings. They have rings made from 4 billion-year-old Gibeon meteorite and genuine 65 million-year-old T-Rex bone. If you are a fan of Vikings, they have Odin ring, the Norse god of war, the Thor ring, and all of them are crafted by hand. Head the link in the comments and use promo code LIVINGHISTORY to get 20% off a truly unique ring.
Now here's the deal. Those Babylonians, they were no amateurs when it came to math and geometry. But here's the kicker. Those scholars agree that they didn't invent much. Nah, they just rode the coattails of their Sumerian ancestors, whose achievements have sadly vanished into thin air. But hey, the Babylonians had their fair share of cultural and social contradictions. The clash between the free folk, the king, and the slaves, it weakened the state like a punch to the gut. First, those hill tribes came swooping in for a raid, followed by the Hittites from modern-day Turkey. Babylon took a beating, my friends. But guess what? The mountain tribes known as the Kassites stepped in to rule the show. Surprisingly enough, they treated Babylon right, restoring temples and embracing classical culture. Yet those highlanders didn't have a knack for politics, and their agricultural crises and economic dependence on Egypt spelled trouble for Babylon. In 1155 BC, those Iranian Elamites swept in and captured the weakened city. Babylon's power dwindled, and for a while it wasn't even the capital of its own state. But don't count them out just yet. The Babylonians had a knack for bouncing back. Fast forward to 626 BC and enter Nabopolassar. This dude started the city's journey back to power. And boy, did it culminate with the notorious Nebuchadnezzar II. In the 6th century BC, Babylon expanded its dominion, swallowing up historic lands and adding new territories to its collection. Picture this. A city of 200,000 people, enclosed by massive walls and a moat. And let's not forget the legendary hanging gardens supposedly erected by Nebuchadnezzar himself. Those gardens are the talk of the town, one of the wonders of the world. Now hold your horses, partner. Some folks cast doubt on the existence of those hanging gardens. They reckon it's all just a tall tale. But you know what did exist? The Tower of Babylon, a mighty 7-story ziggurat called Etemenanke. This place was the real deal, a wonder of the ancient world. Speaking of Nebuchadnezzar, he had a bone to pick with the Bible. Babylon was free from Assyrian rule, but they weren't too kind to the Semites. In 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar straight up destroyed Jerusalem, exiled the Jews to Babylon, and let punishment rain down on them. Some say this Babylonian captivity was a pivotal moment for the Jewish community and their identity. It's all intertwined, my friends. But here's the twist of fate. In 539 BC, the Persians swooped in and took Babylon, leaving destruction in their wake. However, King Cyrus had a soft spot for the Babylonians, so he let them keep their way of life. That's when Herodotus himself strolled into Babylon and marveled at its grandeur. Even with many buildings in ruins, the city stood tall. But hey, nothing lasts forever. In 479 BC, King Xerxes stripped Babylon of its independence. But that didn't last long, because you know who shook things up? Good old Alexander of Macedon, that's who. He stormed through Babylon, rebuilt temples, and resurrected the legendary tower. That guy sure knew how to make an entrance. But alas, in 323 BC, Alexander mysteriously met his demise, and with him went Babylon's plans for a glorious comeback. From then on, Babylon's power dwindled, and the Hellenistic way of life took over. Temples were built, Greek theaters sprung up, and even the gods got all mixed up. Nergal met Hercules, and Marduk shook hands with Zeus. Babylon soldiered on, and parts of the legendary tower were even used to build a theater nearby. They tried, bless their hearts. But here's where it gets real messy, folks. Middle Eastern squabbles took their toll on Babylon. The Parthian kingdom, the Scythians, the Persians, and even the Romans all flocked here for some action. Ownership of Babylon changed hands more times than a deck of cards at a poker game. And you know what that constant warfare did? It slowly ate away at Babylon, driving people away from that cursed place. Historians can't agree on when the great city finally emptied out. Some say it died when the folks migrated to the nearby Seleucid city, while others argue that Babylon stood tall even in the 12th century AD, according to Crusader records. Talk about a mystery. Here's the kicker, my friends. Babylon's legacy lives on even though the real deal has disappeared into the sands of time. Those who inherited the name Babylon sprung up in Egypt and even Europe. But the original city, as we mentioned before, gradually shifted to the substituted nearby Seleucid. The Romans who took the reins were in awe of the grandeur. But alas, a plague struck, crippling both the empire and the new Babylon. Then, for reasons unknown, the Persians uprooted the city a little higher and called it Ctesiphon. It even became the capital of the Parthian Empire for a while, but you know what they say, folks. History has a way of repeating itself. Those Arabs showed up on the scene, and the Middle Eastern disco party resumed, continuing to this day. So why did Babylon vanish into thin air? Well, it's the old story of decline and the inability to study its rich history due to 2 centuries of war in the excavation territory. Even during World War I, British and Turkish armies battled it out on the ruins of Babylon. Humanity's aggressiveness sure knows how to take its toll. And so, Babylon's story came to an end, just like ours. If you dug this wild tale, give us a thumbs up, my friends. Until we meet again, stay groovy.